This video is brought to you by Surfshark. Stick around to hear more about the special offer they are providing to the entire upper echelon community. Alright, today's video is morbidly hilarious and deeply troubling. Everyone saw the title, and many of you are probably wondering what the hell it actually means, so let me clarify. This will be a video examining two industries, video games and the world of medical science, because one of those industries will conduct unpaid, highly detailed, and extremely effective self-moderation, leading to sanctions, punishment, or other remedial measures to combat fraud in record time, while the other industry allows dozens, even hundreds of prolific fraudsters to pollute the authenticity of their field with little to no action taken for decades, if at all. Which one do you think is which? Obviously gamers are better, why else would I make the video, but far from a sort of sarcastic jab at trivial problems, gamers are a lot better at self-moderation, detecting fraud, and ousting misconduct in their own communities, even when compared to world-leading medical institutions or universities, and it's not even close. Let's begin with similarities. Question: how could we possibly compare two fields that are so radically different, that is, video games and science? Answer: competition. Video games at a competitive level, think esports, tournament play, or speedrunning, are an incredibly tense, reputation-driven industry. Win a big tournament, get paid. Be the best, earn prestige, or become a celebrity in your field. Video games are built around competition, and the desire to be exceptional is a massive part of that ecosystem. Likewise, though it may not be as apparent here, given the demographics involved and the academic nature of the work, medical science, primarily publication of papers in journals or securing grants for various different research projects, is also driven by competition. Discover something new, your name will be referenced for decades. Find something unexpected, you just might earn yourself a place in a prestigious journal. Become a top name in the field, doors will open for you, including funding for your future endeavors. And no matter how you look at this, from whatever angle you choose, the basic desire to be the best is a critical part of academic medical research. So why does it matter? Well, that's the fun part, because while unpaid moderators for video game communities or random YouTube viewers, tournament watchers, and amateur detectives devote themselves to ousting fraud in their competitive video game spaces, scientific academia, largely speaking, kind of ignores it. How could this be true? Such a highly regarded industry with far-reaching impact could never be so lax in their moderation, surely. I must have the facts wrong. There must be an explanation. Honestly, perhaps there is, but right after this next segment, it'll be time for evidence, and the picture, in my eyes, is pretty damning. Alright, sponsored video, and that sponsor is, once again, Surfshark. Lately I've been realizing just how valuable a VPN is, a virtual private network. Everything you do online carries a certain degree of risk, of course, but lately I find myself researching certain topics that require an extra layer of protection, and that layer of protection is Surfshark. Surfshark offers defense against certain phishing attacks, a serious issue in the world of social media and crypto. It can protect against malware, DNS tunneling, DDoS attacks, spyware, and also shield you from the inevitable and constant data harvesting, as well as data tracking, from big tech companies. Even further, Surfshark can unlock additional content on streaming websites, like Netflix for example, because geographic location is often tied directly to licensing agreements. Simply change your region and enjoy increased options in your video library for another use. Surfshark can get you around regional censorship, such as government restrictions on various news websites, and also offers encryption, IP protection or modification, and so much more. Today, right now, they're offering a special 85% off and 3 full months free if you click the link down below in the description using promo code Echelon. Again, that's promo code Echelon for 85% off and 3 full months free if you click the link down below in the description. Big thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring the channel. Let's take a look at the world of medical research fraud. First name on the list, Yoshihiro Sato. Yoshihiro Sato was a bone researcher working at a hospital in southern Japan. To this very day, he serves as one of the largest examples of medical research fraud in history, leaving critics stunned and confused on why he did this and for what purpose. From 1996 to 2013, Yoshihiro Sato plagiarized work, fabricated data, and forged authorship. The incredible volume of high-impact studies he had conducted began to raise eyebrows in 2006, but to this very day, not all of his work has even been retracted. Sato was publishing multi-hundred patient research papers on Alzheimer's, bone density, stroke victims, and more, with a speed that was quite literally impossible. When confronted by this, after many years of getting away with the practice, he claimed that there were unsighted hospitals that had helped him achieve such a scale, and for years it worked. Eventually, in 2013, skeptics of his impossible findings began to take action, and using statistical analysis, they began sending letters to JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, which was the highest profile outlet where his work has been published. JAMA, as an entity, said that they would reach out regarding this evidence, but 2 years later, they had heard nothing back. In 2015, they published an expression of concern, but even still, not a retraction, his work was allowed to persist unchallenged. Other prestigious medical journals began to turn a blind eye as well. Going back to investigate high-profile studies? Uh-oh, that's bad press. And worse yet, it's laborious, time-consuming work that no one will thank you for. But over time, the dams begin to break, and slowly but surely, retractions came through. To date, about 2/3 of Sato's papers have been retracted for falsifying data, authorship, or other information contained. He is one of the largest medical research frauds exposed in the last 30 years. But still, not all of his work, including work that has been statistically proven to be part of his fraudulent process, has even been removed. What's worse, medical research like this can be viewed as building blocks, and therein lies a much deeper problem. Sato's work was cited by sequential research over 1,000 times. In a practice known as meta-analysis, where a formal study pattern systematically assesses prior research to derive conclusions about that particular body of work, Sato's fraudulent research with his impossible data was responsible for changing the overall conclusions. What started with one researcher faking a few dozen papers became widespread improper conclusions and findings as a direct result, across many hundreds of papers. Medical research like this has a direct impact on people's lives. And I know this is just one anecdotal example, but the issue of research fraud in academia is widespread. Next on our list is Robert Slutsky. Born in the late 1940s, Robert Slutsky was a radiology resident responsible for a bevy of research papers conducted during the 1980s. After being confronted about literal duplicate data in 2 of his studies, he resigned from his current position, and a later investigation by the University of California, San Diego faculty found 12 separate instances of falsified research. Robert Slutsky was caught because he used duplicate data while producing papers at a rate of 1 per 10 days, while similar colleagues and competitors with a similar sample size would require months at a time to do the same amount of work. Effectively, he was caught because his deception was so brazen and obvious it couldn't be ignored. However, in the grand scheme of medical research fraud, he's a rather small fish. What happens when it's a big fish who isn't as obvious? Hironobu Ueshima, a Japanese anesthesiologist, is precisely that big fish. Ueshima was responsible, over the course of years, for over 140 falsified research papers. Exposed by analysis in 2020 and 2021, this enormous track record of fraud stretched back decades, and once again had an untold effect on wider medical academia as the work was cited, referenced, or otherwise used to make thousands of important decisions afterward. His catalog of falsified studies included work pertaining to amputations, blunt force trauma, and more, meaning that far from a simple case of cheating at video games, his work might now be responsible for untold physical harm. Still, he was punished. Most of his fraudulent work, not all of it, mind you, but most of it, was retracted. So how can I make the case that ethical standards and policing in medical research are failing? The answer to that is our next example, Yoshitaka Fuji. Yoshitaka Fuji is the world's most prolific medical research fraud, responsible for 190 falsified research papers that we know of from 1991 to 2011. Here's the kicker. After being exposed by a comprehensive peer analysis, it took 12 years for actions to be taken against Fuji, because scientific journals don't want to conduct these investigations. They don't want to retract popular work, and the overall atmosphere here is one of desperate avoidance rather than necessary accountability. The list could go on. Joachim Boltz, a German researcher, falsifying 90 studies, and it took literal years for his work to be withdrawn or retracted after being outed as fake. Not even all of it, mind you, just most of it. And considering that this is the field of medical research, with actual downstream ramifications as a direct result of falsified papers, the pattern should be clear. However, there is perhaps no better example than Chen Zhang. Chen Zhang is a medical researcher who decided to take aim in January of 2021 at video games, conducting an experiment to determine whether or not violent video games promote aggressive cognition. His findings were that they do, in fact, have this violent effect. His study contained a number of experiments and variables, but the important thing here is that it's all junk. Soon after publication, initial publication that is, a data scientist named Joe Hilgard attempted to debunk the research paper, highlighting that the values didn't match up. The data made no sense, and after connecting the dots on a number of other works by Chen Zhang, he made a formal push towards notifying relevant academic authorities about actual misconduct. He was ignored. Chen Zhang made moderate tweaks to his procedure under direct pressure from Joe Hilgard during peer review on subsequent studies, and also made a series of retractions himself, but no formal investigation, action, or punishment was ever handed down by almost any relevant academic body. Joe Hilgard was effectively stonewalled, and the result was that institutions protected dodgy research and allowed it to continue, even now, unchecked. A particular phrase rings true here. The amount of energy needed to refute bullshit is an order of magnitude larger than to produce it. This is an exceptionally true statement in medical research, it seems, because the atmosphere is guarded and fearful. While researchers have a well-established desire to publish dramatic findings and garner prestige, universities and journals have a well-established desire to avoid scandal and dodge accountability. According to an analysis of fraud published in the National Library of Medicine, quote, "Scientific fraud reappears with alarming consistency. Several studies have found that more than 40% of surveyed researchers were aware of misconduct but did not report it." End quote. Therein lies the problem. A significant number of researchers commit or are, at the very least, aware of fraud but don't report it, while that fraud is then used as the basic building blocks of further research, polluting a field that theoretically should have some of the most rigorous oversight and anti-fraud measures in the entire world. There it is. Hopefully we can now all agree that academic medical research has a problem, but how does it stack up against video game communities? First things first, the incentives are almost exactly the same. Reach the top of your field, have an incredible performance in a tournament or the fastest time in a speedrun, and you will gain prestige, future career opportunities, popularity, you name it. However, while it may be true that the incentives are there, and cheating certainly does happen, absolutely, we need to also look at the atmosphere as well, because that is where the industries are entirely different. Simply searching for keywords like video games and cheater will begin to paint a very obvious picture here. Video game communities, by and large, hate cheaters, and there's a very clear discrepancy of how misconduct is approached when compared to medicine or research. Video game communities will actively seek out, expose, and humiliate cheaters in competitive gaming, with an entire counterculture devoted to this specific effort, which will benefit itself when successful. In medical science, who benefits when a fraud is exposed? Answer: no one. There is, generally speaking, no direct benefactor when exposing a fraud in medical research. The person conducting the investigation doesn't usually benefit. It takes time, effort, and has absolutely no guarantee of results, even if you find definitive proof of deception. The journals or universities that enabled and published the fraudster don't benefit. If anything, they are damaged by it and often suppress it. And downstream patients might benefit from a cleaner library of information their physicians draw from. Sure, that's a benefit. But that benefit is not directly visible or experienced by anyone involved with the fraud detection in the first place. The ripple effect from exposing medical research fraud is large. Prestigious institutions don't want to deal with it, and if they do, it creates problems for everyone who cited the falsified work down the line. There is a built-in reason not to pursue fraud detection in the first place, because all it will do is hurt the surrounding ecosystem that they all inhabit, which leads to an environment where 40% of surveyed researchers are aware of fraud or misconduct, but no one says anything. Headlines abound when searched for, such as this one, for example, where even falsified data, when it's reported, nothing is done about it. Quote, "Nearly 2 years after a university asked for retractions, 2 journals have done nothing." End quote. Here's the thing though. Precisely the opposite is true in video games. Exposing a cheater in high-profile tournaments will garner popularity and viewership. Prestige comes with tearing down the cheaters, not from protecting them. And even when a high-profile player's deception is exposed, tournaments and event organizers are able to bolster their own image by taking hardline stances against them. It's not universally true per se, but there is a direct and not so small group of people who not only enjoy, but financially and reputationally benefit from taking down cheaters. Because of this, video game communities have a standard of self-moderation and ethical enforcement that is leagues beyond that of medical science. In speedrunning, for example, community members and amateur detectives will literally pore over every single keyframe, comparing it to input commands. If discrepancies where non-possible human patterns are detected, the community immediately exposes them, and offending parties are punished, their world record runs or credentials revoked, and the community cleans itself. To expose splicing, a common cheating tactic in the speedrunning community, impressive runs will be examined with fairly sophisticated audio spectrum analysis, free of charge, just because the community feels like it, leading to a gauntlet of natural crowdsourced cheat detection, which moderates the environment better than anything we see in medical research. Perhaps the most high-profile example of video game cheating in all of history, perpetrated by a YouTuber named Dream, was met with a 29-page, highly detailed mathematical analysis, again extremely sophisticated, which exposed that his gameplay had been altered. Not even altered much, mind you, but the drop rates for various different critical items had been boosted, in a way that was nearly imperceptible to a non-expert, but even so, it was ousted in record time. Dream denied this, even going so far as to hire his own scientists to disprove the allegations, but eventually he came clean, admitting that yes, he had accidentally, I don't know if I believe that, that's up to you, he had accidentally altered the drop rates in his client and therefore achieved a nearly statistically impossible speedrun. How about another example? Trackmania United Forever. Trackmania is a racing simulation game that has an impressive community of competitive racers. Completely unpaid and without any logical motivation other than simply preserving integrity, a group of moderators developed modern tools to examine prior world record races and determined that certain examples were impossible for human hands to achieve. Their findings spurred rapid and decisive action to remove those races from the record books, and the list of examples where cheaters were investigated, exposed, and punished in esports, punished is the keyword there, or other competitive video game communities, is very long. These two entirely separate industries are similar in motivation, but completely different in outcome. For medical research, deception and fraud is incentivized by the prestige and monetary gain it will bring if successful, but the counter-push to investigate and hold bad actors responsible is not really a thing. There are some reputable data scientists and researchers that will moderate their colleagues, and the peer review process does indeed catch a hefty chunk of deceptive work, but once published, the deception is often protected by institutions. If you make it through and manage to put forward falsified work for greater notoriety and fame, the industrial structure might actually defend you on it, or look the other way. However, in video games, it is precisely the opposite. From start to finish, you are regarded with absolute scrutiny on whether or not your world record or highly impressive performance is real. Your footage is analyzed with sophisticated tools over and over again. Your actions are torn apart with a fine-toothed statistical comb, and even long after your achievement has been made, your work will be analyzed and reanalyzed by a massive community of players intent upon preserving the integrity of their own community. Should you be found out, your status is almost always immediately revoked by institutions. Your achievements are nullified, again, as soon as the evidence is presented, and your future in that community put in jeopardy because you have violated the sanctity of their competition, which is the kind of rigorous ethical oversight that we should expect from medical research. Sadly, though, it's not the case. One of these industries is a hobby, populated by amateurs from all walks of life enjoying some activity in their free time, where ethical conduct is rigorously enforced and constantly evaluated. The other, a global industry of academics who are often regarded as the top intellectual minds of our time and our planet, where fraud is rampant, yet typically unreported, and punishment after confrontation or exposure ranges from slow to just non-existent. Video games are a career for some, but a hobby for most. Ethical enforcement of high standards is simply a beneficial reality, but not really a necessity under most circumstances. However, scientific research, ethical enforcement of high standards should be the absolute unflinching requirement of such an industry all the time. The standards here and the oversight employed should be far beyond that of a retro video game speedrunning community, and yet when fraud is detected here, it remains unchanged or unrevoked for years, possibly decades, or forever, while affecting untold future research in the process. Gamers versus scientists. Gamers win. Better community ethical enforcement, better self-moderation, higher standards, and overall a stronger community of people intent upon rewarding legitimacy and tearing down fraud. Scientists, and especially medical researchers, should take note and do much better. That's it. If you want to support the channel, there are links down below, locals and Patreon for monthly membership, the video sponsor, of course, merchandise, social media, a YouTube platform alternative called Odyssey, and more. Again, there's just a whole bunch of things linked down below, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.